one can see all the booze to my right.
Nope.
No. It looks like we're big drinkers, but we're not. I just like the pretty bottles. Welcome to Knit Together with Kim and Jonna. I'm Jonna.
And I'm Kim.
And I'm back. Yay!
Yay! I missed you so much.
Well, thank you to Scarlett for filling in for me. That was cute.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, my husband, we watched that a few times. Yeah. So I thought it was really cute.
It worked out perfectly. I mean,
Yeah.
your first, really my first thought when you said you wanted to stay longer was, well, of course, if I'm a grandma, I would stay longer. And then oh, the video.
I know.
And then, you know what? We'll just make it work. Something will happen and we'll just make it work. And then you had that first idea.
Yeah.
With Adventures with Kim and Jonna.
Yeah. Well, we had gone to Mohawk and climbed this, it's called a lemon squeeze.
The end of it is, that very end part is the lemon.
Right.
The whole thing is called the labyrinth.
Yeah, it's a labyrinth. So it's a rock scramble. And it's one of those things that, you start out, and she'd done it before many years before we did it together.
And I had a friend who'd done it many times leading us. So I wasn't looking for the arrows. I wasn't trying to figure out where to go.
Right. And this time I was the follower and you were the leader. That's why there's all the pictures are of me, basically, because she was turning around taking pictures. Well, it's one of those things, it wasn't on fire when I got into it, when people say that about the bed, Well, you start off and I'm thinking, oh, it's no problem, pretty good shape, we're good. And, and then there's a few stretches where I thought, okay, well, I need to reach a little farther. I need to grab a little higher, got progressively more difficult. And you're a little bit taller than I am. Mm-hmm. And she's stronger than I am.
No, I'm not.
And so there were times when she would just you were ahead of me, and I said, I'm not sure I can bridge this gap, just physically, I'm not sure I can do this. Anyway, long story short, the picture of her standing triumphantly with one hand on her hip and me crawling on my all fours was because we got to the top, what I thought was the top, after we came through the lemon squeeze, which was literally so narrow that I had to turn sideways.
You can't, yeah.
And I had to hoist my rear end up and sit it on a shelf and
couldn't find a copy of that great picture from overhead.
Oh, yeah.
That was the best picture.
Yeah.
It looks like you were...
It's just my gray hair in the rocks.
Birthed. Yeah.
Well, you can't tell if I'm going down or coming up, and I'm coming up, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh.
Wait, and up until then, you're in the middle of rocks. You're not often really up high. There's rocks around you. Right? You're not really
Right. There's not a ledge. There wasn't a cliff.
Right. But when you come... Oh, except for that one.
Yes. Where I cried.
And I made a wall for you?
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Well, because this rock that you had gotten up on, no problem, it had a slant to it, and there was a 15-foot drop, enough of a drop to a granite rock below that it would have been, dangerous.
And it was about 3 feet wide, the ledge, right?
Yeah. And so I basically sat there and thought, it was a point of no return. I couldn't go back. There are all these signs that say, do not turn around. You cannot go back. And of course,
it's a one-way trail.
Yeah. I'm a rule follower. And I'm like, okay, I can't go back. So I'm thinking, I'm going to have to be helicoptered off this mountain because I don't think I can do this. And it wasn't that I wasn't physically able, but I was worried that just the momentum of what it would take for me to get up to that next rock was going to push me over the edge of that rock.
And I didn't actually realize... It was right at that moment. I had no idea you had a fear of heights a little bit.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
For sure.
And so I'm, it's about 3 feet wide, and she's on the side of it so you can see the drop, and she has to climb up, and then once you come around this big rock, then you're back surrounded by rocks. But it was that one little bit. So what I did was I put my feet near the edge of the rock as a fence.
And you held onto that.
And I held the rock. So I was kind of in an L shape over her, making a cage, like a tunnel that she could crawl through.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And you did it. I was so proud of you. But that was the first moment I realized that you had a fear of heights. So then...
Well, yeah, we come from a head injury family. We had a very, very severe head injury in our family, and so we don't climb ladders without so
a spotter or something.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
then when you get
Helmets.
to the very top, it ends on this big flat shelf rock. It's expansive.
By big, we don't mean football field big. We mean there was room for several people to stand comfortably. Okay, not super big. However, the ledge...
It was bigger than this room.
How far?
It might have been as big as this floor of your house.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was
Maybe
pretty big.
the living room and the dining room. We're in the dining
But you're
room.
coming through this teeny tiny narrow gap, and you come up, and all of a sudden you realized, and you
How
can
high
see
up we are.
the Hudson River Valley.
Right. So
the
how
ex-
high would you say that ledge was?
I mean, it's a little lower than the skytop. I mean, it's high.
300 feet?
I'm not good at stuff like that. I don't
A
know.
lot.
We can Google it.
A lot. And so I get up there and I'm thinking, I'm home free. I did it. I'm safe. Terra firma. And we're on a cliff. We're on a ledge. I was like not happy. So I crawled because I didn't feel safe to stand up until I got to the ledge where you're holding on.
Onto the rock.
Yeah, and I held onto the rock. And then...
And in that picture, I look like I don't care, but I do care.
And she just trying not to laugh.
She knew we were laughing.
Oh
She
my
knew we were
goodness.
taking pictures.
Oh my
she
goodness.
didn't mind.
And there were other people up there with us. So.
They were so proud of you and us.
Yeah.
They were like, your grandmas?
Yeah.
Because they were like much younger
I was wearing
people.
these pants, actually.
But then little
I
kids
wasn't
would
even
go,
wearing the right clothing.
oh yeah.
I was wearing like a tank top and these chino pants. So.
And then this family with little kids goes by. And we're like so humbled. Like,
But there was another woman who was younger, much younger than we were, and she turned around.
she turned around.
Yeah.
She was terrified.
I think it was a date situation, and
It seemed that way.
Yeah.
He was very athletic. He was trying to get her to do it.
yeah, she's like, I'm turning around. So,
But you did it. I was so proud of you. And it made for good pictures for our
did.
video.
but we get to that plateau where we took the picture, and then you turn the corner, and you've got to go up another 50 feet.
Yeah, I forgot about
Straight
that.
up.
I thought
And
it
so I was
yeah.
like, not happy. Anyway, I did it. I'll never do it again.
Really?
No, I don't think I will. And if the kids want to do it, if we ever take them there, the kids want to do it, I just don't want to know.
Like the Rugged Maniac, too. After we
Yeah.
did that, you said you weren't going to
Well,
do
that
it
was
again.
because it had a rather large collision with another woman at the bottom of the inflatable slide. And didn't feel quite right for several hours.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was fine until we got to the inflatable slide. Go down those alone. Do not go down those in tandem.
And that was like near the end, right?
It was the end.
The end, yeah.
It was the end. So yeah, Adventures with Kim and Jonna. To be continued.
We'll try most anything, but we might not do it again.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying 2 at a time socks. I may never do them again.
Right.
Anyway, what's this video about?
So this video is about first sweaters. And number one, I wanted to do this because we get so many comments from people who are sock knitters who've never knit a sweater and they have, a lot of apprehension about that, or people who've knit a lot of dog sweaters and never knit a people sweater. Then we get a lot of people who've knit sweaters and who've never knit socks too.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I just thought, as a relatively new knitter, what would I suggest as a first pattern for somebody? So it's funny. So I just got back from Texas, and my daughter. So I basically taught my 9-year-old grandson to knit. I've taught him before, but this time he really picked it up, and he just continental style. He figured out. I said, I can show you how I hold the yarn, but he ended up figuring out how to tension it himself. It was amazing. My 3-year-old
And
granddaughter.
wait, what did he say once when dinner was ready? You texted me.
Oh, he says like one more row. One more row. I was
One
like,
more, Mom.
who is this kid?
I know, I love
he plays
it.
football, plays basketball.
Yeah.
They're definitely boys.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so, but I think, how my daughter explains it, they just want to spend time with me. And so they want to, participate in what I'm doing. So.
Loved it. I loved all those pictures.
And Graham, who is 7, really, really wanted to knit. And we just, the 2-needle thing was just a little bit much. So he ended up crocheting, which was great. And then Eleanor, my 3-year-old granddaughter, ended up doing finger knitting like I couldn't believe. She ended up winding the yarn around her fingers all on her own.
Wow.
Yeah, and just an evening. So,
Wow.
yeah, I was super proud of them. So,
Hopefully we can insert some of those pictures.
yeah, they're not very good pictures, though. I'll just
That's
say
fine.
that
We'll
right away.
just-
So, my daughter, who doesn't knit, she crochets. One night, she's like, well, why don't you can I just see the knitting and can you just show me what to do? And so I showed her a knit stitch, handed her the needles, and she made a knit stitch, and she was like, what? This is like the easiest thing in the world. Like, I'm like, yeah, I know, it's not rocket science. Like, most of the the scary part about being a new knitter is figuring out the pattern, I think. So anyway, so she is like, well, I want to knit something. And
also, didn't she become obsessed after you made that last cardigan for her? And she was like, I just only want to wear hand knits. Right? Didn't she love
and then
cardigan number 7?
Yeah, and then she found Ann Venzel on Instagram and just, I mean, incredible, gorgeous, stunning sweaters, and she wanted to make those. And yeah, so she's super inspired, which is really half the battle.
Yes.
So I honestly tried to talk her into knitting hat, and she just was like, I'm not interested in knitting hat. And
she lives in Texas. She doesn't need a lot of hats.
Yeah, and she likes the hat that I made her.
Yeah.
The one hat. So, and I was not going to suggest a scarf, a garter stitch scarf. Because I wouldn't want to knit that.
Yeah.
So I would say probably my first little bit of advice is really pick a pattern that you want to wear. Like, I think to be inspired is really important. And to pick the best yarn that your budget will allow. And, there are some fantastic sweater yarns you can buy at Michael's and Hobby Lobby, and Knit Picks is a great source, and yarn.com. So, yeah, just buy some amazing yarn in a color that you love. And so I think inspiration is super important. That said, I have to say that, while I was kind of pondering what sweater to suggest for her, there really are some hard and fast things I would suggest to a new knitter about sweaters. And the first of those is I really am partial to a top-down, one-piece, either a raglan or a yoke sweater. And there's a couple of reasons for that. You can try it on after you can try it on at almost any point, as long as you can get over your head. And there's some just fantastic top-down sweaters out there. And I feel like the cast on is a smaller number of stitches, so it's not unwieldy. You don't have a ton of stitches. Casting on 200 stitches is, and not twisting that cast on, that can be tricky. But casting on 60 stitches or 80 stitches or 100 stitches, I feel like that's doable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, let me just look at my notes before I go off on a tangent. So the first thing I want to say is this is not a tutorial or a how-to. This is just kind of my thought process about what to tell people.
Because you specifically recently went through this process to help Emily find a sweater, right?
Yes. And so I think if you're a more experienced knitter, these are things that you can think about when somebody approaches you and says, teach me how to knit. I want to knit a sweater. Things you might want to think about. But then if you're a new knitter, and or maybe you're an experienced knitter and just haven't knit your first sweater, these are definitely some guidelines, some good guidelines, I think.
One of our viewers, she messages me through us. Our Instagram, our joint Instagram is under my Instagram, so I see all the messages. If there's something she has to answer, I screenshot it and send it to her, and and I type the answer in. This one woman is knitting her first sweater. She's been knitting for a while. She's knitting her first, I think she's doing a cardigan. I can't even remember. Maybe the novice cardigan. I can't remember. So she's been messaging me through the whole process.
Oh, really?
Yeah. At one point she ran out of mohair and had to switch mohair, and she can see the difference. She's like, should I stop? And I said, it's entirely up to you. Whether that's one decision. Like, if you make a mistake, you have to just decide, like, is it going to bother me? Will I wear it? Will I not wear it? And things like that. So it was so sad, though, because she's almost finished the body, I think, or maybe she already finished it. And then I didn't realize, but in the middle she had COVID.
Oh, wow.
And now that she's feeling better, she's looking back and she's seeing all these mistakes. So she's like, what should I do? Should I frog it? And I said, well, frogging is a part of knitting. You really have to get to the point where you realize, especially if you're going to knit your first sweater. Yeah.
Casting on and frogging and casting on. Like, I think I might have cast on a project once 9 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we always say, if it's a structural issue and it's going to mess up the pattern, by all means, go back. Don't think it's going to fix itself. If it's
just cosmetic or,
or like if
gonna bug you.
If you realize that you're doing an increase wrong, just keep doing it that way as long as it's consistent.
We call those design choices.
It's a design choice, then. It's going to look a little different, but it works. It's the same. It works fine. So basically she said just yesterday, should I rip the whole thing out? And again, I said, it's really entirely up to you. If you spend a lot of time on this sweater. If you think you're going to still wear it, keep going and just finish it. If you really think you're not going to wear it, rip it out. You'll be much happier. So she's deciding. But it's hard.
So fortunately for me, my very first sweater was a baby sweater. And I love the idea of knitting a baby sweater for your first sweater for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's small. You're going to get through it much faster than an adult sweater. That said, sleeves can be really tiny on a baby sweater. So I think the sweater I knit for Eleanor, my granddaughter, the pattern was called V for Vivi, and I'll link it below in the show notes. And it was a fantastic first pattern. Number one, there was no ribbing around the collar, so it actually has kind of a rolled collar.
Because stockinette naturally rolls.
Yeah. And it was a raglan sweater, so I did have to place markers for raglan increases, and I had to keep track. I don't need to do this now, but in the beginning I did need to keep track of which was an increase row for me and which was a plain knit row. So typically with a raglan increase sweater, you're going to do one row of increases, one row of knit plain, and then another row of increases until you reach a certain number of stitches on your needles before you split for the sleeves. So yeah, it was actually a fantastic pattern. I highly recommend it. There was no ribbing anywhere. So this meant I didn't have to do a ton of purling. The sleeves end with a row of purl stitches and then like 5 knit rows so that they roll a little bit, but not like a lot. And the hem, the same thing.
Was it the blue sweater?
It's a DK sweater. So
Did it
the
have
needles
pockets too?
No.
Oh, that was
the pockets would have, no pockets. But yeah, it was a fantastic first raglan sweater, and I really would highly recommend it. That said, I'm not sure if I used DPNs on the sleeves. I definitely wasn't magic looping at that point. I may have been using small circulars. That's possible. But I remember this, I ended up making short sleeves. I told myself it was because I lived in Texas and she didn't need long sleeves, but it was actually that I think I got tired of knitting the sleeves.
Yeah.
So they're short. And now Max has it, so.
We have a picture of it, right?
I have a picture of it. Yeah, we'll insert it.
I just don't want us to run out of time. But you're reminding me, actually, I feel like when I first started knitting sweaters, were they topped? I feel like at some point I would knit things that were supposed to be knitted in the round, but I was afraid of it. So I would just add 2 stitches and knit it flat and then seam it.
Oh, wow.
Like sleeves.
And that is
But that was way back. I mean, way back. But you can always do that, right? You can always just add 2 more stitches. I mean, it's not, again, knitting in the round isn't rocket science. Just try it. So.
No, and I would highly recommend knitting in the round. I still have a hard time explaining to my mom what straight knitting needles are actually used for. You know, but so anyway. Yeah. I would highly recommend knitting in the round, one piece, you know, not knitting sleeves and body, front and back separate.
Because basically an adult sweater is all the same skills as a baby sweater. You're going to learn increase, especially like with the yoke, you're going to learn increases, you're going to learn a neckband, whether you do sleeves or not, at least when you get to the body, you have to divide anyway. So you're going to learn all of those things that you would need to know for an adult sweater.
All right, so there's a few more hard and fast rules as far as I'm concerned. And I definitely want to hear about your first sweater experience in the comments. You know, and that's how we get a lot of ideas for these little mini episodes.
Well, actually, let me just talk about this then. I don't have much to talk about. But my little tips, she has way more than I do, but my little tips, my first sweater / garment, I mean, it's made of yarn, so I call it a sweater, but it's really like a t-shirt, was this Isabel Kramer. It's called the Edie, E-D-I-E top. And it had short sleeves and raglan. And this I made, I would suggest even finding, if you don't want to invest in really expensive yarn, a lot of you have stash. I would have never used this for anything else. But I love the yarn. But I bought it for this other sweater, which I already told you about. This is the same yarn that I held with mohair and used for 2 of my daughter's ranunculus sweaters. So it's beautiful, gorgeous yarn. But I would have, I just, it's this itty bitty finger, lace.
Which I would not suggest. Do not choose lace or fingering for your first project. She was a very experienced knitter.
Yeah. I made tons of baby things, so that is another suggestion.
This is her first sweater.
I had the same thing written down. Make a child sweater first.
Right.
But I made this t-shirt, and I didn't swatch. I don't recommend that, but honestly, if you don't want to swatch, don't swatch, because you can always give it to somebody else.
Or use your garment as a swatch.
Exactly. So this was like a simple, there's not even ribbing on the neck. It's just whatever was there, I think. Right? It doesn't look like I did anything to the neck.
Were there short rows?
I don't remember.
Probably not because it's a V-neck, but possible.
And raglan? I don't think so. It doesn't look like it. And it fit. My bind off on my arms was a little snug, but it fits. I wore it actually in one of our videos under a denim jacket. And then the bottom, there were short rows at the bottom actually.
Oh, okay.
And I don't even know if I did them right, but they match. They match. There's a teeny tiny little curve in the front and the back on the bottom. But that's the first thing I made, and I was so happy. And then this was the second thing I made, but I'll talk about that later. So this was my real first sweater ever.
And what I would say about this sweater, if you have already knit a sweater and you want to try a Colorwork sweater, this is a Colorwork sweater without being stranded Colorwork. It's all done with slip stitches.
Yes.
And this part is just texture, but these parts are slip stitch.
Right, it's called mosaic
knitting.
And I didn't even know that. I actually, again, this was one of my sample things. I walked in to pick up every stitch. I saw this sample, and it was the first day they put it out, and I said, I have to knit that.
Yeah. So if you're dying to make a Colorwork sweater and you're nervous about Fair Isle stranded knitting, I highly recommend.
But again, this is an example of find something that you really want to knit, because I really wanted to knit it. But this was knitted flat, and I actually had to sew it together at the raglan. It's a raglan, but I had to sew it together.
And you had never done Colorwork at this point.
I had never done, and I just assumed it was stranded, so I didn't even realize it was mosaic. I was kind of happy to find out it was. And I didn't swatch it either. I probably made it a little shorter than it was supposed to be, and I love it. So I was very motivated to finish it.
Yeah.
So definitely, I agree with you. Pick a sweater that you love.
Yes. But I want to look at my notes because I don't want to forget.
No, don't forget.
So
I keep interrupting.
No. Definitely choose a pattern where you can, if you can access Ravelry and you can look at patterns that have project pages, choose a pattern that has several projects. Don't choose a pattern that has 0 projects that no one has ever made before, because you're just going to miss out on that wealth of information. So for example, like the ranunculus or the Sunday sweater that I'm wearing, which I'll talk about. This was my first adult sweater. There are thousands of projects. And
that was your first adult sweater?
For my first adult sweater.
Oh, well, I forgot that. What's it called again?
The Sunday sweater by Petite Knit.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah. So, there was a wealth of information. There were, people who held 2 strands of yarn together, which I wouldn't recommend for your first sweater. I would highly recommend just using 1 strand of yarn to knit your first sweater. All people of all different shapes and sizes, people who've made all kinds of modifications. And that the pattern has been gone through so many times that if there are any errors whatsoever or any, parts of the pattern that are fuzzy, you're going to get someone on there who's had the same problem that you've had. And if you look on the top tab of the pattern page, you'll see comments, you'll see yarn suggestions. It's just a wealth of information. So that's what I prefer. I prefer to go onto Ravelry, choose a pattern that has a gazillion projects and, where I can look at other people's experience.
One thing that, I don't know if you've told me this, but somebody else recently, because I'm knitting my Amina out of the worsted book, is the problem with purchasing a book, which there was no Ravelry. I always bought everything in a book.
You don't get the updates.
Yes, because sometimes it's just, someone had to type that in. And maybe the original designer didn't make a mistake in the pattern, but somebody had to type that in to print it in the book. And so there might just be a typo or so if there's a mistake in a Ravelry pattern, they typically update it right away and you're downloading the most recent copy. But if it's a book, I've never checked to see if there's errata. I had heard actually that there was a mistake in my Orkney pattern. So I contacted Rowan and they sent me updated charts. But there were still mistakes in those charts. But yeah, so if you're going to knit from a book, I think, haven't you told me, you can usually go to the Ravelry page if that pattern's there, contact them and get the find out if there's any
I think in the
mistakes.
back of your worsted book, and check if I'm wrong, there might be a code, and you go to Ravelry and you put the code in, and it automatically populates your library with the patterns from that book because it knows that you purchased it.
I see.
And that code can only be used once.
And then if there's mistakes in the pattern...
Yes, and they will update.
Okay.
Right, and you'll have digital...
So if you buy a book pattern, a book of patterns, then always check, right?
Right, and oftentimes, indie patterns are very explicit, several pages, a lot of hand holding. But if you buy a pattern from, a big yarn company in a pamphlet, you might get a rough sketch of a sweater. And I would not recommend that for a new knitter. I would definitely recommend some kind of hand holding, a very detailed pattern. What I like about the petite knit patterns is she'll write a paragraph about what you're going to do, and then the next paragraph is how to do that thing.
That bothers me.
I know, right? But
that drives me nuts.
Once I realized that,
right,
because I would read the description and go, well, how do I do that? And then the next, that's another tip, is read through your entire pattern before you cast on, something I probably rarely do. But anyway, so don't choose a pattern that no one else has made. Choose something you love and the best yarn you can afford. We talked about that. And then don't buy lace or fingering.
I didn't buy it. I had it.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I get it. But if you're giving advice to a new knitter, I would not steer them towards fingering or lace.
No, it'll take forever to do a couple rows.
Yeah, and you want some instant gratification. So, yeah. All right. So we talked about the V for Vivi pattern. Just make sure that so I said everything I wanted to say about that. So, So this was my first adult sweater. It's a Sunday sweater by Petite Knit. And you can see it's just ribbing, basically. And this is a yoke sweater, which I think for a new knitter would be almost preferable to a raglan, because in this sweater, I think there were 6 increase rows. So you knit the pattern, which is kind of a rib pattern. So it's you can tell it's like some knits and some purls. So in 6 of the rows in the yoke, you're making increases. And so, knit 5 rows in the knit purl pattern. And then on your 7th row, she indicates how to, and so you knit for 7 stitches and then a make one. A lot of patterns will say make 12 increases evenly over the row. Now, as a new knitter, I would think to myself, well, what does that exactly mean? So I like it when a pattern will tell you how many stitches to knit, make one, knit the same number of stitches, make one. It definitely gives me a level of comfort. Yeah. So this pattern also doesn't require short rows, which in the beginning, right before Kim got here, I actually sewed the collar down. And this is the way the pattern is written.
Oh, that's what you were doing.
Right.
Oh, so it's doubled now. It wasn't doubled before.
And this is the way the pattern's written. And I made this sweater like 4 years ago, and I've never done it. But every time I wear it, I think, I want to sew the collar down. So
but it was cute. It was just a little taller.
Yeah, I sewed it down right before she got here, so I love it. But there are no short rows in this pattern, which I also highly recommend. Short rows are really nothing to be afraid of, but I think it's just one more thing to think about. So it's like, when you learn to drive a car, it all seems very overwhelming with the turn signals and the windshield wipers and the brakes and the this and the that. But I think the fewer things you have to think about while you're casting on your first sweater, the better. So this was a great choice for that.
So you're saying choose one with short rows or without?
No, without short rows.
Yeah.
Right. If you can.
Yeah.
And it fits great. So I think
just in case you get one with short rows, and I don't usually see patterns that say this, but if I do short rows, I usually, because eventually you have to, depending on which kind you do, you have to knit the stitches together. Right. Yeah. So I always put a marker in every time I do a short row turn. Okay. The pattern never says to do it, but I always do it because I have I'm always distracted. I have grandchildren living with me. At least if there's a marker,
for sure.
When I come back across it, I go, oh wait, this is a short row. Was I supposed to do something with it? Yeah.
And a lot of Norwegian patterns, there are no short rows. Like Aaron and Carlos talk about this. Well, what are short rows for? They raise the back of the sweater because there's actually more territory on your body in the back than in the front. And so it raises the back of the sweater up. And it's really just for comfort. But since I sewed this collar down, and that's something that actually bothered me a little bit about this sweater, but since I sewed this down and I'm wearing it to pattern now, it's actually fantastic. So,
and if you knit something flat, you don't necessarily need short rows because you're automatically making the back. Stitches. Yes. Right. Usually it says you knit the back first. And then it says make the front 26 rows shorter. So that's making up for that, right?
Exactly. So, I use German short rows, so I always see that 2-legged stitch. So I'm
afraid I won't see it.
Yeah.
I'm just afraid to do it without markers.
I'm
sure I would see
markers
it,
for
but I
wrap
don't
and
want
turn.
to miss them and then accidentally knit them. I just don't want to.
You know, I used to love wrap and turns because I don't know, I just thought that they were like German short row. That just sounded scary to me. So, but actually, wrap and turns are, you have to resolve them differently on the purl side than on the knit side, and I always had to look it up. And
I still have to look it up. And I told
really
you when
hard
I made
to see unless you use a marker.
Yeah, when I made all of those hide and seek sweaters for the first couple, I did wrap and turns incorrectly,
Oh.
and then I realized it on one of the sweaters, and so the one and anyway, one side is different than the other. But anyway, it is what it is.
Yeah. So anyway, no short rows.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, one of the great things about a yoke sweater also.
Now, how would you know all these things though? If you're not gonna, I mean, like if you are going to pick out a pattern, would you walk into a yarn shop and say, "I'm gonna knit my first sweater. Which one should I do? I don't want short rows. I don't."
You're gonna say, "I listened to Kim and Jonna, and they said they said these are the things I should think about."
Say, who are Kim and Jonna?
Yes. No, these are gonna, you know.
Just say, my knitting friends told me.
Well, I would hope that owners or people who work in a yarn store get this question a lot. And so it's not the first time they've thought about it. And at Pick Up Every Stitch, they recommended V for Vivi, and it turned out great.
Yeah.
So definitely experienced knitters who are going to have the same kind of information.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Also, the great thing about this was, I think this pattern actually calls for you to hold 2 strands of yarn together. I would not do that. I would just choose a bulky or chunky yarn, according to that's the correct weight for the gauge for the needles. And
did you swatch?
I did not swatch. And one of the fantastic things about this is because the sleeves are generous, I could use a 16-inch circular to knit them. I didn't have to magic loop. I didn't have to DPN. Yeah, so that worked out great.
But at the very end, you had to do something.
I'm not sure what I did.
Isn't it funny how we don't remember?
I know. I must have
decreased at the very end.
Right, at the very end. They're kind of balloon-ish.
They're beautiful. It's beautiful sweater.
I must have DPN'd because I don't think I knew how to magic loop. And I don't know that I had even circulars that were that small. But the rest of the sleeve I knit on 16-inch circulars.
But it's only like, what, 8 rows of
ribbing.
Yeah.
And my bind off is too tight. But anyway, it's fine. Yeah, so actually petite knit
and we also know
general,
every little problem with every sweater, and other people look at it and nobody ever knows.
No.
Ever.
Oh, I was going to say the other thing I really like about a yoked sweater is that you don't, usually a raglan sweater, you knit to a certain stitch count before you separate the body and the sleeves. But with a yoke sweater, you're working those increases as part of the pattern. So the pattern knows when you've gotten to the right stitch count and will tell you, okay, now you separate the body and the sleeves.
Mm.
Yeah. So you don't have to keep track. And it's just one less thing to think about. Whereas I'm knitting this this raglan sweater here, and I have every row I need to, is this an increased row? Oh no, it's just a knit plain row.
So the difference, in case people don't know, they probably do, the difference between a yoke and a raglan is in a raglan the increases are only on these lines that create these
There's
raglan
4 of them.
lines, and every sweater will have like a very decorative one with lots of detail, you know, like there's different ways to increase and if you're going from bottom up it would be decrease, but all the increases are here, whereas in a yoke they're spread out among.
Yes, they're spread evenly around.
Okay.
Yeah, the circumference of the sweater.
Okay.
So yeah. So I think one of the most popular sweater patterns on Ravelry is the flax sweater by Tin Can Knits. Now, I have never personally knit a flax sweater, but I do have the pattern because it's free. So, you know, go ahead and download it. It is made with Aran weight yarn. So it's a nice thick yarn, bigger needles. There are almost 24,000 project pages. So if you can't find your yarn in there, and I do that, I search for the yarn that I want to use, and I read the notes, and I see what other people have done, other comments people have made about that particular yarn for that particular sweater. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention, and I'll probably mention this in episode 5 too, and I'm going to talk more about Texas and my yarn shop visit, which was super fun. And
you can go to our Instagram and see that. We did put some pictures in.
Yeah, and Emily's first sweater choice. But yeah, so I guess I thought, you know, in the beginning with Ravelry, I didn't really have friends on Ravelry. Like, I didn't really know what that function was for, but I have since friended some designers and maybe someone I met at Vogue Knitting Live or something. But because you all have friended me on Ravelry, I have so many friends on Ravelry, which is
Really?
so
People
cool.
have friended you?
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
I'm sure they
wow.
friended you too. You just never
I
checked.
just never go on Ravelry. Sorry.
So I have all these friends, thank you. But the coolest thing I realized is that, so I started this no frill sweater, and I'll talk about this, I don't know, episode number 5, I guess. And so I went to the pattern and I went to the project page, and you can filter by friends.
Oh, wow.
So I can see all of the projects that you have made.
Oh, nice.
So I have to say, Ravelry is just, I was a fan to begin with, but now I'm a super fan. So anyway.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I love seeing what you guys are working on, and I love seeing that you've made the same sweaters. And yeah, it's this community that I was kind of missing out on Ravelry. So anyway, super fun. Yeah, so I was going to talk about the flax sweater. Do we have time?
Let's just take a little break.
Okay.
But before we do, I just want to say what I'm wearing because I didn't say it. And we don't usually say it when we're doing these little mini-sodes,
Yeah.
but because we're talking, this is my first
Sweater. We wore our first sweaters.
It's the, gosh, where did I write it? It's the Kaleidoscope sweater.
Gee, I wonder why they named it that.
By, oh my goodness. Do I have the pattern? I am so disorganized today. I can't even believe it.
And we're going to we always put all the details.
I love the drawing.
If I forget,
On the front.
message me. But
It's so beautiful.
yeah, I
always
try to
see
put
it.
all the details in the show notes underneath the video. So click show more, and you'll see the name of the sweater and the yarn she used, the designer,
Yeah.
maybe a link to the pattern on Ravelry.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's by Marianne Benedetto, and it's her company is A Priori Knits. We'll put everything in here. And I just love it. It's just fun and funky.
And this
it's
is made
neat.
out of the same yarn as
all of the hide and seek sweaters.
Yeah.
Someday I want to get a picture of, well, now they're growing out of their sweaters. Never mind. Too late. Too late. Okay. So you were going to talk now.
Oh yeah, we're
more
going to talk
in depth
about the flax sweater. So 24,000 projects on Ravelry, and it's often taught as a first sweater in classes in yarn shops.
Mhm.
And I have never made one, so
Which would be another great way to knit your first sweater. If you're not just going to do it on your own,
yeah.
join a class at a yarn
for
shop.
sure. For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And actually, when I was in Texas, they were teaching the flax sweater in a class. And I asked her about it because there is this garter stitch panel down the sleeve. So you have markers for it's a top-down raglan. So you have markers where your raglan stitches are. And a raglan stitch, my daughter asked me that. What's a raglan stitch? It's actually just the little decorative stitch in between in the middle of the increases. So yeah, I asked her about that garter stitch panel on the sleeve, and she goes, "Oh yeah, I don't teach that part because you actually have to you should probably put in markers to make sure you purl every other row on the sleeve to make this garter stitch panel down the sleeve. If you like garter stitch, fabulous. If you don't like garter stitch, just totally skip it. So if
You
I were
just
gonna
do it stuck in it. It's fine.
yeah, just do a stockinette. So if I were going to make that sweater, I would probably not do the garter stitch panels down the sleeves. Also, I think the short rows are optional. I think you can knit the short rows, and there's like an option to do that. And then the main pattern, I think you're not knitting short rows. So I think it's nice to have that choice. This was one of those patterns, though, where it said make 12 increases evenly spaced over the next row. And so if you've never done that before, you might wonder exactly how to do that. Now you just take the total number of stitches, divide by the number of increases, and then you know how many stitches you have to knit before you knit an increase. But that's just one extra step and a little bit less hand-holding than I think is nice for a first
sweater.
Yeah.
I think actually when I bought that yarn, my last visit to Perfect Blend, she was suggesting sweaters, and I decided on whichever one I decided on. What was it called? I don't remember. Anyway, I was saying cyan or cyan, and she said it's pronounced something else.
Oh, right.
Sean, maybe? I can't remember what she said. But
It's an Irish name.
I think she suggested that sweater as well. And she also told me, did you know this Tin Can Knits is kind of famous for inclusivity and gender-neutral
and
patterns?
I should totally say that.
Right?
One of the most
I
fabulous
didn't even
things
know
about
that.
this pattern is it literally comes from newborn to probably the largest size you could possibly knit. They are super size inclusive.
Gender neutral.
I've knit several of their patterns. I haven't made a flax, but I have made their Rocky pants. I don't know, made a couple other things, and a lot of their patterns are free. And they have a lot of tutorials. So if you need help with the flax, they've got tutorials. Also, you can search on YouTube for flax sweater tutorial. And I think I did see one video where she'd gotten permission from, and I can't remember them. It's Emily and I can't remember the other person. 2 women. Mm-hmm. Their books are beautiful. Their yoke sweaters are beautiful. The colors they choose are beautiful. Yeah, so lots of tutorials and pretty explicit tutorials on YouTube. So if you need some hand holding, there's lots of options. I think the sleeves are fairly fitted, and so you would definitely have to use some DPNs or a magic loop or small circulars to do that small circumference if you're making a baby or child size. Yeah, so a couple other just quick pattern suggestions, and of course, I'm such a huge fan of petite knit, but the novice sweater chunky edition. And I actually bought the pattern because I just wanted to be sure that I was, telling you all.
So you haven't knitted it?
I haven't knitted it. No, but a lot of her sweaters are similar. So this is a Sunday sweater.
Because I made the cardigan.
Right.
Chunky edition.
Right.
Yeah, the novice cardigan, but there's also a sweater.
Right, which I only just didn't recommend the cardigan just because you have to knit flat, purl back and forth.
But it's very similar to the number 7 that you knitted.
It is. But the Saturday night sweater is also similar, and the novice sweater chunky edition, I would highly recommend. It uses chunky yarn, so it's got large needles, and so you're going to get through this. I think I made this in like a week. Of course, I was highly motivated. But it's a quick knit, and all these sweaters are circular yoke, so you've got 4 rows of increases, or you've got 6 rows of increases, and there's no short rows in any of these sweaters, and the increases are make one less. So you can put that into the YouTube search bar, make one left, continental style or English style, and you'll get a great, probably Very Pink Knits will pop up, and you'll get a great tutorial on that. So easy increases. Yeah, so I think those are some really great for sweater options. So the V for Vivi for little ones, and any of the petite knit sweaters that I mentioned, the Sunday sweater.
And actually, if you knitted a child sweater in the same yarn you're going to knit your sweater in, you have
gauge
already. Then you have a gauge.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I didn't even think of that.
That's,
yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, and then the flax sweater, which everyone kind of recommends as their first sweater, but. Yeah, I think it depends on if you're knitting for a child or if you're knitting for yourself, what you're going to choose.
Yeah, I would just add. I'm not an expert sweater knitter at all by any means.
I'm not either.
But I do wish. I mean, it turned out fine. I didn't swatch. I don't know why it turned out fine. Actually, I think it turns out coincidentally. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but when a designer designs a sweater, the gauge is their gauge, what they knit.
Right.
Because they create the swatches, they create the design, they create the measurements, what it's going to look like based on their gauge. So if you happen to have the same gauge as the designer, you'll be fine. But some people knit really loose and some people knit really, really tight. I've realized, I think Danny Sunshine, who designed Hide and Seek, I have the same gauge as her. And then this, I don't know, it just turned out right. And then, so I would recommend swatching, but if you don't, one thing I told someone recently is start knitting, especially a yoke sweater or a raglan, because it's a small circumference. Start knitting, and when you get a few rows, measure them. Check your gauge. Yeah. Because technically, knitting in the round, you're supposed to do an in the round swatch, which I hate. So now what I've decided to do is I'll start the sweater, and when I get, enough rows in, I'm going to measure, and that's my gauge swatch. So I already know ahead of time I might rip it out. And that's just what I'm going to do.
And I know ahead of time I won't rip it out, and I'll just make more raglan increases. I'll just make the armpits a little bit deeper.
See, I didn't even think of that. She's so smart. That's why she's the expert and I'm not.
No.
So I would recommend.
I think you can change sizes on the go. Right. I think so. I cast on a small in this, but I could easily make it a medium. I'm going to look at the stitch count. I'm pretty sure it's going to fit,
But we love Andrea from Fruity Knitting, and she also continues to measure as she goes, just to make sure.
Because your gauge does change depending on what kind of TV you're watching.
Also, I did want to mention, I took I really have not taken many knitting classes at all. I took the one with Josh Bennett with you, and then after that, just this last fall, I decided to sign up for the Vogue knitting, what's it called? They did it like online, and they've been doing it online, right? So it's live, but it's online. So one weekend, I signed up for as many classes as I possibly could, and my favorite class was taught by Kim McBrien Evans, and she teaches, what I took was Anatomy of a Set-in Sleeve and the Sweater Map Set-in Sleeves. But basically, she teaches you how to modify a pattern to fit you, to know, just to, first of all, take your measurements. Like when you were talking about how the sleeves are what did you say? Narrow. If you have a bigger upper arm, I just tend to have bigger upper arms and a bigger.
That's why she climbed the mountain.
Right.
Faster than I did.
So like some blouses, let's say I wear a large blouse, I have to try it on because the sleeves might be too tight. So it's all my muscles, yeah.
Right.
So she suggested this My Body Model program website, and it shows you how to take all your measurements, and it eventually
have someone else take your measurements.
It creates this body model of you specifically, your body, a 3D picture.
Oh, wow.
Or not 3D, a 2D picture of you.
Cool.
And all your measurements are correct. Like that's what I look like. No, I don't have an hourglass figure anymore, so I'm more straight. But then let's say you're going to make that sweater and you've done the body and you want to know if you're going to have enough. You could add more, you could make your sleeve do less decreases up here.
Yeah.
Just with using your gauge, see how many stitches are going to be in the sleeve, right? And then measure that and measure your arm and make sure that it's going to fit you so that you don't do these sleeves. Well, you can try sleeves on, thank goodness. But if you really want to make a sweater to really fit you once you've done your first sweater, then take a class with Kim Evans and do this. It was amazing. Oh, it was life-changing. And now I definitely use all those measurements to see how long I want my sweaters. Yeah, I love it.
One thing Andrea from Fruity Knitting does, which is just amazing, is instead of making, doing increases or decreases, she will just go up or down a needle size.
Yes.
Which is so fascinating.
And you would never notice. And her
never notice. So it's not like it changes the texture of the fabric at all.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
So like if you want it to be, like even just to do shaping, right?
Yeah, right.
Especially if it's a really complicated, she'll start with a bigger needle, do a smaller needle, and then a bigger needle. I mean, so that's amazing. So
I'm super interested in this conversation. That's probably the thing I love most about knitting. I love talking about knitting. And I love other people's thought process. So we literally read every single comment. If we don't heart it, we have definitely read it. We try to heart everything even before we don't respond.
Yes.
I mean, we had no idea that we were going to be having hundreds of comments, and
we just posted the 5,000 subscriber giveaway.
Yeah.
Right? We have on YouTube the community, right? The YouTube community, and we posted for our subscribers. So if you want to join, you have to subscribe.
Right. If you want to see our community posts.
I think, right?
Don't you I think anybody can see them, but if you want to be notified, I think you have to.
Yeah, if you want to be notified.
Yeah,
so
notification.
So we posted that we're going to do Jonna search through her beautiful stash because she loves all her yarn, beautiful stash, and she chose.
I was like, oh, these are like my babies.
3 beautiful.
But I really wanted to give away something just beautiful, something that I personally would use, something that you could actually make a sweater with. It's a sweater's quantity worth of yarn.
It is. It's over 1,200 yards of yarn.
Yeah.
There's a picture of the yarn.
And you could do a fade. That's kind of what I had in my mind, that I would do a fade with it. And yeah.
But we want to see what you make. But yeah, so one person, because we hit 5,000 subscribers a couple weeks ago, we're having a 5,000 subscriber giveaway. So the details are in that community post if you want to see the details. We're not going to announce it. We might eventually announce it in our video, but it's all through the community, our YouTube community. But go ahead, viewers. There's so many comments. I haven't even responded to any of them yet, but we read them. We love them. I mean, we talk about them all the time.
We really do. So I was just going to say, because I'm a process knitter, I am super interested in other people's process and what you would recommend for a first sweater and why, and maybe tell us what your first sweater was, what your experience was. I mean, I was a new knitter when I knit my first sweater. Now, she was a very experienced knitter when she knit her first sweater, so obviously
very different.
Yeah, I would never have chosen this. All over texture, I would not have chosen this.
Seaming.
Set-in sleeves. Yeah. Not in my wheelhouse at all. That said, I'm super happy with my first sweater. Yeah, especially since I sewed the collar down this morning 4 years later. It's like a whole new sweater. I might actually start wearing it more often.
Now, did you sew in your ends inside?
Oh no, but I did.
No, don't even tell me.
Oh no, the ends are sewn in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
I just noticed on my Nordiska, I have one little piece of yarn underneath the arm that I forgot to weave in, but that's already felting inside really nicely. So,
you might just be able to cut that.
Yeah. No, but I sewed this down, and I did leave 2 little ends of the yarn so that I can tell which is the front and back of the sweater. And so I will do that in sweaters.
Oh, you should tell that little tip. Yeah.
So I'll take my Felix sweater. I have a hard time telling the front from the back on that sweater. So I took a little piece of turquoise yarn and I just, I think I must have used a needle to slip it through one of the stitches, and I tied a little knot. So I know that little bit of turquoise yarn is the back of the sweater.
Especially if you're gifting it to somebody.
Oh, yeah.
And because we don't put tags in. I know I've always wanted to be the kind of person who put tags in, handmade by Kim, but after doing the whole sweater, the last thing I want to do is sew something else in there.
Yeah. On my brother's Oslo hat, I did buy the petite knit. She has
I
labels,
love that.
and I put the label on it.
Yeah.
And I have to say, it's pretty cute.
It looks like a store-bought hat. It's
does.
gorgeous.
It totally does.
Yeah. So is that it? Thank you for all these tips. What are we going to call this mini-sewed? I had just kind of written in, so you want to knit your first sweater, ... What do you want to?
Yeah, I just want to be sure that, I might look at that and say, oh, I've already knit my first sweater. I'm not going to watch that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I don't know.
Okay, we'll figure it out. We don't know what we're going to call this yet. But
yeah.
Nice. But thank you so much.
Tell us about your first sweater or something like that. I don't know.
Okay, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
You'll find out when we air it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming into my home. Thank you for listening to us and spending time with us. It's really great.
Yeah, and you can use our hashtag, hashtag show Kim and Jonna. I'll put it down here.
Oh, which has been another fabulous thing.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not a huge social media person, so you should just maybe know that about me.
But then show us pictures of your first sweater.
But I will try to go through Instagram, and I hit the tag so that I can see everything that's been posted and go through and I look at all the pictures.
And thank you for the person who told me you can sort them by newest. Remember I complained last time because they're all random?
Yes.
Somebody told me that you can sort them by newest. That was a lifesaver. Thank you. I can't remember who it was. Sorry about that. But yeah, that helps so much.
Good.
But yeah, thank you. So good to have you back. I missed you so much.
I know, I missed you too.
But my stomach's growling. Can you hear that?
Time to go.
I guess so.
I meant to feed you. I asked you if you wanted something.
I know, but
I have flippy soup.
Okay, after we turn off the camera.
Okay, all right. Yeah, you don't want to eat it on camera. We draw the line there. No eating on camera.
Yeah, but I'm tempted.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
If you like this video, hit the like button. I can't tell.
Thumbs up, whatever.
Yeah, thumbs up. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, so tell me what you're going to talk about just so I kind of know.
All right.
Ready?
It's always nerve-wracking. There's no one here.
I'm not a Birkenstock person.
Clogs?
I'm not a clog person. I don't know what I am, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I definitely need a style. Weird is the new normal, right? You sound so intelligent. I don't know what yarn I use. I just follow the pattern. I don't know. I feel like you have such a cute style and I need a style.
That's funny.
My hair is my style.
Yeah. Your hair in your car.
But this sweater is my style.
It is.
Like, what is that style?
A little colorful.
Yeah. Anyway, so.
Unusual.
That's me.
Does my hair look okay? Is my braids?